Morning everybody, how are y'all doing today? I'm doing great myself because, we're finally back on track with the videos I promised you guys a few days ago. And today we're going to be taking a look at a PlayStation fanboy who would have guessed it, is salty about the Microsoft Activision deal. Now this video is like a week old now or so I need to say this was made around the topic of, Microsoft saying that, oh, they suck at what they do. And basically how they had to admit that they suck at basically everything gaming related, which I'm pretty sure most people would agree. Because let's be real, besides making a good console and making Game Pass really good, they kind of suck at what they do. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, the only good first-party games I can think that they've made recently are Forza Horizon 5 and Halo Infinite at launch. But yeah, I feel like I have to say that just in case any PlayStation fanboys, want to take this video and twist it in some way. Or any of my videos for that matter. But anyway, yeah, this guy's basically just going over what Microsoft said about how, they had to admit that they suck at what they do. And yeah, overall, I thought this video was very hypocritical. And right before we get into it, I had to speed up the first, 2 minutes or so by 300% because it's all filler. Guess you gotta hit that 8-minute mark. But anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it.
This just in to Salty's PlayStation News Report desk. Microsoft got crying because the CMA aren't doing what they want them to do and are actually questioning the legitimacy of the Activision acquisition. All this much more in today's edition of the Salty's PlayStation News Report.
Why are you crying?
What's up, Salt Nation? Now, I know you guys are sick and tired of this Activision, Microsoft, Sony triangle that's been going on, but sit back. I got something to show you.
What are you gonna do? Told you. We're hanging out, watch a movie, take some pictures. Movie.
Enough of the memes. I get it. Got Jeffrey Dahmer. The Jeffrey Dahmer show on Netflix is popping up. I've seen that name, so you guys enjoy that.
I don't know, I just find it kind of ironic that he's calling out Microsoft for crying when that's all Sony has been doing recently, but, you won't find a single video on his channel of that now, will you? It's kind of funny, man. I thought you were supposed to be a PlayStation news channel, but anytime something bad happens with PlayStation, you never cover it. Just seems a little bit suspicious to me, but anyway, let's continue on here.
But let's get into the news update when it comes to the Microsoft Activision acquisition. In September, the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, said its inquiry into the $68.7 billion merger had officially been expanded to a second phase due to a number of antitrust concerns. Now, this comes off news that Brazil pretty much came out in full support of the Microsoft Activision deal. They're bloody buddies with Microsoft, so that's not a surprise. Fast forward to Wednesday, and the CMA detailed in full its reasoning for concerns, including the impact of competition in the console game streaming and service spaces. Now, of course, Microsoft is trying to play the victim here, which is weird because they're a $1 trillion company, and they're doing whatever they can to downplay this acquisition.
Bruh, do I even need to say anything? A PlayStation fanboy is gonna call out Microsoft for trying to downplay the acquisition? You guys were the ones always saying, oh, this is nothing. Remember my first video on the channel was talking about the amazing Lucas and how he was saying that Microsoft buying Activision was a nothing burger by his own words. All PlayStation fanboys did when the news came out was try to downplay it, but it's okay for you guys to do it, but not when Microsoft tries to do it, right? If you guys are waiting to hear my thoughts about, Microsoft trying to defend themselves and all that stuff, don't worry, we're gonna get to that.
Now, this tweet by Tom Warren, I'm blocked by him, by the way. He's an Xbox guy. This is what he had to say on Twitter. Here's Microsoft trying to make it look like it sucks at Xbox and gaming. Last place in the console space, 7th place in PC, and nowhere in mobile game distribution. CMA thinks Microsoft has an advantage in cloud gaming with Windows and Azure. Microsoft says no.
I mean, besides the whole Azure thing with the cloud gaming, which he's going to get into in a second, I mean, they're kind of spitting facts right there, are they not? They are last place in the console war, as, PlayStation fanboys love to say. Their Xbox launcher does not do well on PC compared to all the other platforms like Steam. And yeah, they basically don't do phone games much at all. Any they did do in the past are just gone now. But I love how quickly the narrative changes. PlayStation fanboys for so long have always been saying, oh yeah, Microsoft's last place, they can't do anything right, they suck at making games. But now that Microsoft themselves are saying that as an excuse to be able to buy a company, now they're gonna go against that. Now I wouldn't be surprised if this dude started arguing, oh, Microsoft's always done insanely well, which he doesn't, but again, wouldn't be surprised if that did happen. But yeah, I just love it. As soon as Microsoft agrees with what the fanboys say and then they use that to their advantage, all of a sudden, everything the fanboys have been saying apparently just never happened.
And guess what Microsoft had to say when it was asked about cloud gaming? Well, they said that they don't even use their Azure servers, which makes them the most money. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not an idiot, and I'm not going to play the fool here, and the CMA are not idiots. So when Microsoft shoves this bullshit out there and expects everybody to eat it up, and they don't, they start crying.
Yeah, and like I said, that whole thing that they don't use those servers, like, that's a complete lie. That's complete BS. I agree with him on that one. But I love how he's gonna call out Microsoft for pushing out BS, and, you know, they start crying when nobody believes them. But when Sony pushes out their BS saying that, you know, Microsoft shouldn't be able to have exclusives, Microsoft is hurting the gamers, you know, that's perfectly okay. We're not gonna mention that whatsoever, right? Also, get ready for your brain cells to melt out your ears with this next part. If you've watched Fritz videos at all, you probably know who he's about to reference right here.
Microsoft also made it a point to talk about the level of content available on the Sony platform. Shout out to Red Dragon, this was his tweet. Microsoft says Sony PlayStation had 5 times more exclusives than Xbox as an argument that Activision Blizzard deal should go through. Xbox is using poor game releases, mismanagement of studios as a way to appear like a weak trillion-dollar corporation who needs this to compete. Interesting.
Who would have guessed a PlayStation fanboy is gonna reference another PlayStation fanboy when trying to dunk on Xbox? Like I said, if you guys watch Fritz videos, you probably know who this guy is that he just read off the screen. If you don't, then go watch some of Fritz videos. They're really funny. But I love this argument that, like, oh, they have tons of money, they don't need this. You do realize that money does not equal good management and good games, right? Like, you should realize this by now. I mean, Xbox is the #1 proof of this. I love how they disprove themselves by making their own argument. Because let me just put it like this. Microsoft has all this money and all these developers, and like they admitted, they suck at what they do. They are not good at managing their gaming division. And they've been trying to do this for 20 years now. And over the course of 20 years, they've had good games, don't get me wrong, but they've had a lot of stinkers, especially compared to Sony. So if they keep dumping money into what they already have and it hasn't been working repeatedly, then what is the logical decision to make? You've really got 3 options. 1, continue what you're doing and just, you know, continue to suck at what you do even more. 2, try to establish new studios under your name, but then the problem with that is that takes several years to set up, takes several years to make games, and then you don't even know if those games are going to be good or not. Or 3, they could buy an already established studio, publisher, set of developers, whatever, that already have a lot of great games, and then they don't have to wait another 20 years to hope and pray that they're going to be doing well, because the company they purchased is already established. So yeah, you know, Microsoft isn't weak in their other divisions, in their other technology divisions and stuff, but again, it's so hypocritical because PlayStation fanboys have always shrieked about how, you know, Microsoft sucks, Microsoft's in last place, they can't manage their studios to save their lives. Then once Microsoft starts making moves to, you know, acquire some better studios that can be managed better and give them a much quicker return on their investment, the goalpost is suddenly moved. Now all of a sudden they have to make their own studios, they can't buy anything, even though, you know, Sony's been doing this for years. I'm gonna give a quick analogy real quick. I know this rant's been going on for a while, but I just need to get this out of the way because I think this is a pretty good analogy. Also, this is gonna be a food analogy, so maybe you're gonna get hungry by the end of this, so maybe go get a snack. But imagine it like this. Imagine Microsoft is a grocery store and Sony is another grocery store. And Microsoft as a grocery store, you know, they do insanely well in every department except for their dessert department, which would be the gaming department for them. They have good things there, but most of it is, you know, kind of looked past. And it's not why people go to their store most of the time. Then you have Sony as another store. And since Microsoft does all their other stuff so well, people don't go to Sony quite as often for, you know, their regular groceries, but Sony makes really good desserts. And imagine Microsoft has been trying to compete with them in the dessert department for a while, but they can't quite seem to do it. They keep dumping money into it, they keep trying everything they can, but no matter what, they just cannot manage it well. No amount of money is saving it. So what would the grocery store do in that case? Would they just keep dumping money into their dessert section and hope that eventually it gets better? Or what what they should do, you know, is they should go out and maybe look at these big established dessert companies, pick out a really big good one that, you know, has already been well established, that people already love, that already makes billions of dollars, and they decide to buy it so that way they can have that company work for them. And then on top of making extra money, you know, they'll start making better desserts. And they've promised that they're going to keep allowing those desserts to be sold at the Sony grocery store as well, at least for a few more years. I hope that analogy was good. I'm sorry this part of the video was really long, but let's get back into it now.
Now let's get to another interesting tidbit of information. Shout out to Christopher Dring. He had this to say about the CMA's report. The UK regulator has detailed why it is currently concerned about Microsoft's proposed acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Number one, the impact on PlayStation game subs, the impact on game streaming. The CMA said there's a realistic prospect of substantial lessening of competition in gaming consoles, multi-game subscription services, and cloud gaming services. Microsoft responded to that in a soy boy type manner and said the Sony's market leadership currently with 150 million install base versus Xbox's 63.7. Now, if you do the math, that doesn't add up well for Microsoft in their inflation of numbers. You'd split that between the Xbox One and Xbox Series consoles and you get that 63 million, and the 150 million comes from the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 player base.
Okay, yeah, it is really disingenuous that they would try to, you know, split numbers and stuff like that, but it really doesn't make that much of a difference, honestly. If you add up all the PS4 and PS5 players on the install base, you get 150 million, right? Guess how many you get if you add up all the Series consoles and Xbox Ones? You get around 75 million. Even if you add up all the numbers, Sony still has double the install base that Microsoft does. And again, I just love how quickly the narrative changes. You know, PlayStation fanboys would always brag about how bad Xbox was doing, how well Sony was doing, but now all of a sudden that Microsoft can use those numbers in their favor, and now they're backtracking, and now they're, you know, trying to disprove that. You really do love to see it.
It's interesting also that they suggested that the incumbent market leader with clear and enduring market power could be foreclosed by the third largest provider as a result of losing access to one of its titles is not credible. While Sony may not welcome increased competition, it has the ability to adapt and compete. Interesting how Microsoft says this, because they're not adapting and competing on that level. All that they're trying to do is swing their $1 trillion around and hoovervac all the competition up, while their own studios are failing to do the most important thing, which is make competitive games on the level of Sony.
Yeah, like I already said, they've been trying to adapt and compete for the last 20 years or so. I guess 19, because, you know, Bethesda was, what, 2020? But up until they bought Bethesda, they were trying to adapt and compete, and look where that got them. Absolutely nowhere. And once again, I have to say, you know, Sony has been doing this for years, you know, buying studios, buying timed exclusivity deals, which, you know, PlayStation fanboys like this guy would then brag about. Apparently, it's perfectly okay when Sony, you know, wants to pay developers to keep games off Game Pass, to, you know, make third-party games exclusive. But when Microsoft wants to buy out a company to help financially support them and make better games from them and put them into their subscription service, all that, that's a horrible thing, apparently. Like, what kind of logic is this? I genuinely don't get it. How is it okay for Sony to just pay to keep games off other platforms and, you know, perfectly okay for them to buy development studios and stuff, but then when Microsoft wants to buy out the company to, you know, welcome them into the Xbox ecosystem, you know, give them more money to work with, allow them to collab with more developers, and, you know, to get them to put their games into Game Pass, that's a horrible thing, apparently. I really just do not get it.
Like I said earlier, in terms of the game streaming issues, Microsoft also had a weird, interesting response and said concern is flawed because Xbox Cloud Gaming Service does not use Azure and does not stream games via PC hardware. Interesting how you would do a game streaming service and not use your own multi-billion-dollar servers, the Azure cloud servers, which is complete and utter horseshit.
I mean, once again, I agree that is complete BS, but I'm not going to repeat myself, so let's get into what he thinks about this now.
Now that all the fine details are out of the way, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the current situation. Steve Jobs, rest his soul, had some interesting words to say about Microsoft. I'm not going to play them. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase what he said. He said Microsoft is essentially soulless. They have no heart, spirit, etc., etc. That is exactly the case with Xbox and Microsoft and the way that they're going about these acquisitions.
So let me get this straight, because Steve Jobs, the CEO of Microsoft's direct competition, that being Apple, said that Microsoft isn't very original and they don't have any taste. That means Microsoft should not be allowed to buy Activision. Do I have this right? Also, I love how he tries to twist the words there. You know, he's saying, oh yeah, Steve Jobs said they're soulless, they're heartless, they don't care about anything. When in the quote he's showing on screen, he just says that they're unoriginal. And this is just too rich that, you know, a PlayStation fanboy is calling Microsoft unoriginal. Dude, what has Sony innovated on? Most of their exclusives have just been third-person, over-the-shoulder movie games. Lately, they've been remaking games like nobody's business. Also, do you really want to call them original when the only reason they started doing video game stuff was because Nintendo and Sega were doing it and found success in it? Do you really think that Sony just sat down one day and said, yeah, you know what? We're going to make video games and consoles for the love of it. We're not going to do it because, you know, we want money or anything. We want to do it because we want to introduce culture. No, that's not how that went at all. They saw how much money other companies were making off of video games, and they were like, hey, let's do that. Also, how is it heartless and soulless that Microsoft wants to buy a company so they can put their games on a great value subscription service, and so they can put more funding into the games? Is it not soulless at all when you know Sony just pays to keep games off other platforms so people can't play them, and they're forced to buy a PlayStation to play them? Like, the hypocrisy is just out of the window.
It is comedy to me that they're clapping back and saying, let us compete, and acting like they're the people that are the underdogs, the Cinderella story in an NCAA tournament. They have trillions of dollars. They have huge sway when it comes to power and what they can do to a market.
Yeah, they have trillions of dollars, but like PlayStation fanboys like you have been pointing out for years, you know, those trillions of dollars don't really mean anything. No matter how much Microsoft has invested into their Xbox ecosystem, it hasn't exactly worked out too well for them. There are exceptions, obviously. They've made some good games, you know, Game Pass is great, but for the most part, it hasn't worked out too well, and Sony fanboys will be the first one to tell you that. And for the millionth time, I just love how now, all of a sudden, you know, Microsoft's the big guy. Microsoft can do whatever they want. They can compete whenever they want to. When before it was, oh, Microsoft can't compete. They suck at what they do. They'll never be good. You really love to see it.
And if they do what they're trying to do with the Activision acquisition, and they already acquired Bethesda, it just screams one of these Walmart situations. When Walmart started, it wasn't this superstore, get everything in one place situation. Walmart was actually, it started off very small, then it grew and grew and grew, and guess what happened? All the mom and pop shops that sold things at a lower cost got snuffed out because Walmart had the money to offer things at a lower price. Once your competition is gone, then you can put the price wherever you want it. Now, personally, I do think that Microsoft does need Call of Duty to continue to be third place, because they simply don't have the leadership to be able to be top tier when it comes to the industry. No matter who they acquire or what studios they acquire, they seem to always fuck it up.
So you literally just admitted that Microsoft by themselves cannot be on top of the industry because, you know, of their bad leadership. You just reiterated what you were just dunking on Microsoft for saying, but it's perfectly okay when you say it. This is what I'm talking about. As soon as Microsoft uses the PlayStation fanboys' arguments against them for like why they should be able to buy something, then all of a sudden it's not okay. But when the fanboys say it, that's perfectly fine. Also, from what I've seen, they've done a perfectly fine job managing Bethesda and all its studios so far, so yeah, I can't wait to see what they do with Activision. Now, could this all go terribly? Of course. But I think as long as Microsoft lets Bethesda and Activision just do what they've been doing, but now they just have a bigger wallet to work with, I don't think there should be any problems.
They seem to always mismanage everything. Now, I can list off a list a mile long of what they've done and what they've put out, but we don't got time for that in this video. I really hope that this Activision deal does not go through, simply for the fact that it would force Microsoft to think introspectively and perhaps pull their heads out of their asses and think maybe we have a leadership problem that needs to be fixed, and then we can use our resources to foster the talent that we have.
I mean, once again, I could have sworn, you know, all you PlayStation fanboys always argued that Microsoft and Xbox had no talent. They just sucked at everything they did. What happened to that? Apparently, now that this deal might actually go through and they're getting a bunch of really huge publishers, now apparently it's a leadership problem. Now they have the talent, it's just they're being held back by leadership, right? I mean, for 343, that's definitely definitely the case, don't get me wrong. Nobody's gonna miss you, Bonnie Ross.
And develop things instead of lying to the CMA to get a deal pushed through so you could just acquire everything. It's like a rich kid that gets a Ferrari, crashes it. He doesn't care because he's going to get another Ferrari from his dad. There's very little investment there because you're just not invested. If it fails, it fails. They've done this with the phone, Zune, Microsoft's competitor to Twitch, Mixer. It came and it went. They just have money to throw around, and if shit happens, it happens. And we're basically consolidating the industry to giant corporations, which are more invested in microtransactions, free-to-play models, making the most money, and then us console gamers who are more of a niche market get tossed out the windows.
Well, luckily, dude, you don't really have to worry about being left behind because, you know, Sony's starting to work on live service free-to-play games as well. But anyway, moral of the story, guys, just don't be an extreme hypocrite because, you know, Sony fanboys have been making these exact arguments for years now, but then once Microsoft makes the argument to go in their favor, then all of a sudden it's apparently an issue. I wonder why that is. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch you all next time.